after dreams.
Today we're going to be doing a tutorial on how to in-between. I'm going to try and explain as much as I can about in-betweening. I'm going to try and give you some great tips to help you with in-betweening. I have this clip here and I'm going to in-between a few of these poses in a second. But first I want to explain what in-betweening is for people who don't know. In-betweening is one of the essential parts of making frame-by-frame animation. Any like animes you've watched, Disney films, internet animations, they will be using frame-by-frame animation. Is basically the traditional animation, but it can now be done in programs like Adobe Flash and Toon Boom and things like that. So this is specifically for frame-by-frame animation. Tweening is like a whole different thing, and 3D is an entirely different thing as well. In-betweening is essentially drawing between two poses or two frames, drawing the movement that goes in between them, linking the two poses, so drawing the pose that comes in between, and by doing so you create the illusion of movement, and it smooths everything out, makes everything look much nicer, and it increases your frame rate. You might have heard animators use the terms ones and twos and threes. So if you're animating on twos, that means you're probably animating at about 12 frames per second. So if you want to make that smoother, you would animate on ones. That would make your frames twice as concentrated, if you like, and that would bring it up to 24 frames per second, and that will look smoother overall. But we're not going to do that. We're going to be bringing, I think this part of the animation is like fours and fives, and we're going to bring that down to maybe twos at the most. It's going to come down to like 12 frames per second. I don't really like to go to 24 frames per second. I think it's kind of overkill. Even though I animate on 24 frames per second, I generally leave spaces for it to be on twos the whole time, because animating at 24 frames per second is extremely labor intensive. Anyway, I'll show you what I've got here. I've got this clip of an acrobatic skateboarder. So he jumps out the window there and he lands on the skateboard, and he rolls by. So he regains he regains control of the skateboard after getting a bit unbalanced here. So this is the part which requires the most in-betweens right now, because you'll see that on the timeline that the keyframes are very spaced apart. So it kind of creates this juttery feel, and it doesn't feel finished. Like, watch. That just doesn't feel finished, does it? We're going to draw frames in between these key poses, and those will be our in-betweens, and they will make the entire thing smoother. So what I'm going to do that is I'm just going to bring in, I'm just going to make blank keyframes in between the keyframes that I have already. And we'll see, does that one need it? And we're going to have a chance to drag these about a little bit and manipulate the timing of these frames a little bit more. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring in the blank keyframes, so there's one in between every two keyframes. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to label them. I'm just going to label them here in the frame label I, so that I know that these are the in-betweens, and the rest that aren't labeled I are the key poses. That's just something I like to do. It's not absolutely necessary, but there you go. So I'm going to pick one just to do as an example, but you'll be able to see what I do exactly, and I'm going to choose a nice easy one. I think I might choose this one here. I'll do this one, and I'm going to take you through what I do for my in-betweens, and also like what you need to know, basically. Right, so I'm going to change the color actually, just so you can see it a little bit clearer. And then you see I zoom in a little bit, so I at a nice comfortable distance, and I use the hand tool to move around, and then the drawing tool. But anyway, so you can see here that I'll just start wherever, but on one of the frames, on this frame, we got the side of the waist here, and then on the next frame after it, we've got the side of the waist here. Now with onion skin turned on, you can see both of the frames, and we are able to see the side of the waist in both. So I'm going to draw this just directly in between, like that. I'm going to draw a new line directly in between. So that's going to link the two, and create the illusion of motion, which is what we want. Now, I should probably explain that. So onion skin is located right here, just below the timeline. Don't worry if you're not using Adobe Flash, because more or less every animation program has an onion skin feature. It's like the standard thing to have in an animation program, and it basically allows you to see the ghost frames of before and after, and that allows you to make a more informed decision on your placement. So because you're able to see what comes before and after. So this mimics the traditional drawing method of using a light box, where animators will use a light box and they'll draw, and the light will shine through the pieces of paper and illuminate the pieces of paper underneath with the drawings underneath. So it's actually based off a traditional method. Anyway, back to the drawing. So now I can see the waist is here and here. I'm going to do a little line like this. And with the shirt, this shirt is going to be like flapping quite a lot. So here, it's not going to be a consistent, smooth thing. So I'm going to come back to that later, because that's where it gets a little bit more complex, because that's not a direct in-between. But here, I just follow the leg down. I can see them on both, and I just fill in like directly in between. It's a bit like dot the dot, but your brain does the work. So and something like that. Do the skateboard now. Before I go on, I have a new exclusive in-depth tutorial I just finished editing. It's about animating complex kinetic movement in the human body, and as an example I'm using this 360 skateboarding scene. I'm making it freely accessible to my mailing list subscribers for a limited time. It's over half an hour in length, and it goes into a lot of depth about how I created this scene. It has live commentary as well, so you can hear my exact thought process and the techniques that I use as I do them. For those of you who really want to sink your teeth into learning these techniques, I recommend that you head over to animatorguild.com and sign up for an account so that you can watch it. Okay, now back to the video. Occasionally you'll have to do a bit of guesswork, and also there are some things which require you, when you're in-betweening, to kind of imagine them as 3D objects rather than just a series of lines. And so if you're drawing like a cube or something, that creates special circumstances where you don't necessarily draw directly in between the lines. In fact, there's a lot of circumstances where that happens. So in fact, a lot of the time in-betweening isn't actually drawing directly in between. And in the case of like drawing human movements, like we'll draw the arms real quick. So here I've done my own style, which is like a blurry line. I like to use motion blurs, but anyway, the thing with drawing a lot of human movements or animal movements is that everything works on a hinge. So your joints have like a hinge here and a hinge here, let's say, and then let's say the next one is from here to here, right? So this joint won't be here, it will be out here, it will be pushed out here, because this distance has to be the same distance away from the hinge, like here and here and here. So you've got to keep that in mind sometimes doing in-betweens. And also what you can do, let's say you want to do that, what I do a lot, so let's say this is the hand or something, I will do it directly in between like that, and then what I'll do is I'll select it and I'll just push it out a little bit, and then it's the right arcing kind of motion involved. So that's like, I'll have to show you in more detail in another video, but here I'm doing the head, and I'll do the hair. Now with the hair, it's not that important if it's not directly in between, because again it's like fluttering with the wind. I'm going to spare the detail on those bits right now, on the face. And occasionally I like to flip back and forth between the first and second drawing, like that, and get an idea for it just helps me get an idea for like where the movement is and stuff. Now I've done the fluttering, so this is like more of a random kind of drawing in here. I don't think I have to I don't have to link them perfectly for this kind of stuff, because the cloth that is his shirt is kind of doing its own thing. So I like to create a bit of a random flutter in cases like that. Same with the sleeve. Alright, so now when we flip between these three, we can already see that that movement is very smooth. It's getting a lot smoother, you see? So before it was just from there to there. And now we have one in between. And when we start to play through that, it will look like it's actually moving. And this is like basic foundation of what frame by frame is just creating an illusion of movement by drawing lots of frames which appear to be moving in a certain direction or something. So I've now done that. I think that was a fairly easy in between. That should be, I mean, that's like one of the easiest in betweens you could do. It's directly in between. However, there are lots of different opportunities to make much more advanced in betweens, and you shouldn't necessarily always just draw directly in between each drawing. In fact, that will probably lead to some bad errors in certain parts. So I've already gone over the hinge thing, the fact that all of these are arcs, but I'm going to actually show you how a movement is an arc, and I'm going to do that with this piece of animation here. So I'm just going to run through it once or twice so you can see this. So we got this rough animation again of this girl who's doing some free running, and it's quite a crazy piece of animation, right? Now let's say we track the head. So I've already done this, but we're going to track the head, and now I've drawn a line here which shows the path of the head. You see? So the head follows that path. It's quite a complex path, but you'll see that the lines are curved, very curved. So basically, you can do this for any part of the human body. Now I'll show you the one for the hips. So the hips move in a certain way as well, and I've tracked them here. You see? Now, basically, what I wanted to show you from this is that all of the parts like of the human body follow in like an arcing motion. They don't move straight from one place to another. They kind of bounce and arc and weave their way there. You should always like try and push them in an arcing pattern if you can, in a curving pattern. So I wanted to give away one more tip that I think some of you might benefit from. So I had this animation part here where this girl blows, or boy, I don't know what it is. He or she blows a whistle like that. What I found difficult was that I couldn't draw for the in between the head this with the same exact properties, because it's a very complex shape. So what I did to do this is, it's very simple. What I do is I create a blank keyframe, and I take the head. I see the head here, and this doesn't have to be for in betweening. This can also be for a new key pose. But I just draw the outline of the head shape like this. I basically trace it out. Now this is going to allow me to make some very subtle movements and very precise movements, and it's not going to have any shake, and it's not going to go out of proportion. So the head's not going to get smaller on frames, because that's a big reason, a big problem with animation is keeping traditional animation is keeping the proportions correct. So anyway, we'll do just rough out the hair. So now I've traced over it, I can move this slightly. Let's say I want it to go slightly down for this frame. So it's very easy. I've kept the proportions exactly the same, except I'm able to move it now, and it's going to still have that hand-drawn quality. It's going to seem like it's been drawn out again because I traced it. I've moved it, but I've kept the proportions of the head. So I hope that makes sense. That's like one method you can use if you're struggling to keep relative proportions of your characters. You might be asking, how do you make in-betweening very easy for yourself? And I think the answer is that in order to make in-betweening a very easy process, make your keyframes very consistent and neat, and make sure that they're on model. So here I've taken a little bit of extra time to make sure that this pose, these two poses are on model and they work together. And because I spent a little bit of extra time making sure that these poses are correct and that the creases are in the same kind of place and they move across, it means that my job as in-betweening is going to be a lot easier. So now when I in-between this, I'm going to have way less trouble with certain things are missing on the next frame, or they go missing, or you'll encounter a lot of problems if your keyframes aren't that consistent. So now it's just a process of going through and drawing between the lines. Please subscribe if you want to find out more about how to animate in frame-by-frame animation. And I create a lot of cool action scenes and I break them down into tutorials so that you can learn them. If you have any questions, any video recommendations, I'd really love for you to leave a comment down below and let me know what you want me to cover next. Goodbye. I have a new exclusive in-depth tutorial I just finished editing. It's about animating complex kinetic movement in the human body, and as an example I'm using this 360 skateboarding scene.